I now want to draw a link. I want to turn to some very fishy links between the imminent advent of another trawler and this federal government's role in that, and some donations made to the Liberal Party by the Southern Bluefin Tuna Industry Association that have recently come to light. The Southern Bluefin Tuna Industry Association is based in my home state in South Australia. They've been very outspoken in the past in support of the super trawler when it was coming to Australia last time around, and they are outspoken in favour of super trawlers such as the one that is now again approaching or wanting to approach our shores. And why? Well, the thing about tuna farming, and I'll come back and give a bit more of an explanation about how that works in a minute, but the thing about tuna farming is that with farms you actually have to be able to feed your product. You have to be able to feed your tuna. And for every 1 kilogram that's added to the weight of a southern bluefin tuna that is being farmed, you actually need to feed it 12 kilograms of fish meal. 12 kilograms converted into 1 kilogram. If we're talking about feeding the world, if we're talking about efficiencies, it's obviously highly, highly inefficient that we're concentrating large amounts of protein into small amounts of protein. But why is that happening? Well, there's a lot of profit to be made out of that, and we'll come back to that. 97% of the pelagics caught in Australia go to fish meal. And that's small fish like sardines and so on, and they're the species that are targeted by super trawlers. They go to fish meal, and it's fish meal that's fed to the tuna in the tuna farms that are being fattened up off the coast of South Australia. When the last Seafish Tasmania trawler was caught small pelagics, they were sold as fish meal. Now, what will happen with the proposed trawler if there's going to be pelagic, when the pelagics are caught with that? Well, the government's saying that Seafish Tasmania may sell small pelagic fish catch to Africa for food, and of course that would that's an interesting idea because of course if that were definitely going to be the case, then there would be some kind of a moral argument at least that we're feeding people who need that protein. But, in fact, there's no certainty about that, and it's been very difficult to know previously where the pelagic fish were going to go, and of course we don't know that yet. So there's a very strong possibility, and you might like to watch this space when we see what happens over time, but there's a very strong possibility that any pelagic fish, the stock from any super trawlers, will actually be sold to Australian fish farmers. But let's watch that space. There is some uncertainty about that at the moment. That's some of the scientific uncertainty or political uncertainty that we're dealing with in this space. But let me take you back now to the way that the tuna farming industry works and what happened in relation to the donation that the tuna farmers made to the Liberal Party before the last election. So Australia's tuna fishers made a $320,000 donation to the Liberal Party. Most of this, $250,000 of it, was before the last federal election, before the 2013 federal election, and $70,000 was after the election. Why did they make the donation after the election? Well, I'm not sure why that would be, but they have never before given any donation to the Liberals or any other party. So what transpired? What did the Liberal Party do? Right. Well, when the Liberal Party gained office, two things happened very quickly. The first one was that they changed some of their policies. And what was the result? The result was a windfall of over $600,000. I think the figure's around $800,000 to the tuna fishers after the election. And they did this by delaying the introduction of video monitoring technology, which was designed to stop rorting of the data about the quota that is being taken in tuna in Australia. Prior to the election, we know now that Liberal Senators Richard Colbeck and Sean Edwards visited Port Lincoln and Ceduna, which is where the southern bluefin tuna industry fishers are mainly based. They had a couple of visits there and they had some meetings. And although in estimates Senator Colbeck didn't remember discussing donations initially, he did come back and recollect that in fact the idea of donations to the Liberal Party had been discussed. And as well as that, there was a letter, a written undertaking specifically committed to reducing red tape that had been raised by the tuna industry. Let's go back to the question about southern bluefin tuna and how it works.
Senator Wright, would you please take your seat? Yes, point of order,
Point
Senator
of order, Madam Acting Deputy President. I'm just wondering whether the senator is prepared to make these allegations outside of this chamber.
That is not a point of order. Senator Wright, please continue your remarks.
Thank you. And in fact, the allegations are not allegations, they're statements of fact. They're on the public record in the estimates, and in fact they've been reported in newspaper articles outside the chamber, and I invite people to Google and find out the story. There was one particular article in the Sydney Morning Herald about this. So what we have here is, I've been outlining a chain of facts, a chain of what occurred. People can draw their own conclusions from it, but to me the conclusions are pretty clear. So we have southern bluefin tuna, and let's not misunderstand this. This is a critically endangered species. It's recognised internationally as a critically endangered species which has been overfished. It's vital, therefore, for this critically endangered species that it is not overfished, and that is managed internationally by a quota system. Obviously, vital for the conservation and the integrity of the quota is that it's not rorted and that there is accurate data around whether the quota is being met or not. It's also part of a fishing industry which is worth about $1 billion internationally to those who benefit from it. So there's been high-stakes negotiations between countries like Australia and Japan about the size of the quota their fishers can take, and they've long argued over their shares. Australia's quota is around about 5,000 tonne per year. However, soon after the federal election, the quota for the Australian fishing industry, the tuna fishers, was actually increased by about 10%. So we have the Australian industry centred off Port Lincoln in South Australia. Nearly all the tuna in that industry is netted live in the Great Australian Bight, and then it's dragged in cages slowly through the ocean. Some fish die in that process and are thrown away. These fish aren't counted as part of the quota. The fish are then transferred into pens in the ocean near Port Lincoln, and they're fatted up in the cages, as we heard, 12 kilograms of pelagic small fish to grow 1 kilogram of tuna. And then they're on-sold. To Japan's sushi and sashimi market. A handful of families are involved in this industry, and they have multi-million-dollar licences. So let's be clear. If we're looking at feeding the world, this is a very inefficient way to do it. There have been long-held concerns about the integrity of the quota system, which relies on the reliability and accuracy of the data. And so what was proposed by the international organisation was that there's going to be video monitoring, because that's one way to actually ensure that we have proper data. There had been concerns raised that a sample taken from the top of the cage where the smaller fish are congregated would underestimate the average size when the larger fish are below the cage. Also, there were fish that die before they arrive in the pens, and they're not counted. So the introduction of video evidence that Australia undertook to do in 2012, committed to a full rollout by 2013, was a way of trying to ensure the integrity of the process. 2013, we have a new government who advised the chair of the Commission for the Conservation of Southern Bluefin Tuna that Australia has decided to postpone the implementation of stereo video monitoring until an automated solution became available. That was met with dismay by New Zealand, and Japan was extremely concerned because they noted the extra uncertainty of unaccounted mortality created by the delay in the implementation of the stereo video system. So we have a delay in the delay in the video technology, which has netted the South Australian Southern Bluefin Tuna Industry Association and the tuna fishers, rather, about a saving of about close to $800,000. And of course we also have the consequences whereby we have an international commission where there's mistrust and concern about the reliability of the quota system, and we have Australia taking a step like this, which means that we will then have consequences potentially from countries like Japan, who will have the grounds perhaps to say, well, in that case then, if we can't rely on the system that you're implementing, why should we, or what will they do? How will they respond? It's just human nature. So that's the politics of what's occurred. So let me finish by saying that we need to be sure that the decisions that we're making in this parliament are truly based on the science, that they're based on accurate data, that we set up the systems that are necessary to ensure that we have that accurate data, and that those systems should not be subject to undue influence by donations that are being made to political parties who happen to be in government.
Your time has expired.